Learning brake technique is one of the last skills most drivers develop. In this content, I'll describe how, if we remain conscious of how we use the brakes in different corner types, can help turn us from being a good driver to becoming one of the best drivers in your grid. When we use our brakes, we're dissipating all that energy that's built up under throttle from your previous exit to your current brake zone. Because we're on brakes for just a few seconds compared with the time on throttle, we generate more forces on the car under braking than we do cornering or on throttle. It should be easy to see how developing a good brake technique can help us control how these forces are dissipated, helping the chassis remain compliant and helping us maintain grip through the beginning of the corner sequence. We don't use the brakes to slow the car, rather we use the brakes to select a speed to negotiate the corner and to enable us to get back to wide open throttle as soon as possible. Many drivers think the most important part of the brake zone is the initial brake point, that is, to brake at the 4 marker, at the 3 marker, or at the 2 marker. The key point to get across in this content, and to help us be more efficient on brakes, is to instead be conscious of the end of the brake zone, that is, the point at which we come fully off the brakes, begin to apply throttle, and once we apply throttle, we don't lift until we're at wide open throttle. Not all corners are the same, and not all corners require the same type of brake application. The key is to experiment and then discover when you get to wide open throttle. You can tell when you got it right when your engine RPMs are higher at the exit and when you need to upshift sooner heading to your next brake zone. In this example, the driver applied an initial brake application between the 200 and the 150 marker. The driver then began to come off the brakes at the 50 marker and started their turn in. The driver came fully off the brakes here and started to apply throttle, but had to lift slightly here as he or she was running out of track and didn't get to wide open throttle until here. Here the driver did everything the same early in the brake zone, but in the last 10% of braking and turn-in, held the brakes for a heartbeat longer, helping the car to rotate. The driver came fully off the brakes a little bit later in the brake zone, but was at wide open throttle here. In this example, this equates to several feet of throttle application, yielding a few miles per hour more at entering your next brake zone. If you're liking this content and believe it has information that you can use right now at the track, click subscribe and ring the bell to get alerted when we upload new content. When I talk about experimenting with brakes, what I'm talking about is making subtle 5 to 10% changes through the 3 main phases of the brake sequence, that being the point at which you initially apply brakes, your brake pressure modulation beginning to middle of the brake zone, then the end of the brake zone when you release the brakes being the last 10% of the brake zone. And then pay attention to when you get to wide open throttle. Do you get to wide open throttle sooner in the corner? Then do more of that. If you get to wide open throttle later in the corner, do less of what you just did. For the initial brake point, maybe brake a little bit sooner in the corner, or maybe brake a little bit later in the corner. For brake pressure modulation, maybe brake a little bit lighter in the corner, which we typically want to do in a high-speed corner, where you want to bleed just a little bit of speed to help settle the car, to help negotiate the corner. Or maybe you want to brake harder initial brake application, get some threshold braking, and then a smooth release of the brakes, which you typically want to do in a low-speed corner. The end of the brake zone, being that last 10% of braking, the point at which you release the brakes, is the section of the brake zone that separates the great drivers from the good drivers. The great driver is ready to modulate the release of the brakes at last 10%, maybe helping the car to rotate a little bit more like in the previous example, or getting the weight to transition to the rear more smoothly so you don't get understeer. To put all this in effect, let's look at a couple real-world examples. Here we are at Creston Hill, Turn 5 of Mid-Ohio, one of the more technical tracks in North America. The brake zone at 6 is a downhill brake zone with a slight uphill heading towards the apex at 6, and the front end is going to be pretty well compressed in this zone. And releasing the brakes too soon here will cause the front to wash out, causing understeer. So letting this play forward, driver crests the hill, comes down the hill, applies the brakes here. The front end's pretty well compressed. He's got a slight uphill heading towards the apex. So the driver's going to hold the brakes for a heartbeat or two, releasing the brakes at the apex at 12 when you can see the Honda Bridge. Driver gets back to throttle and then is wide open throttle heading towards Thunder Valley. Remaining at Mid-Ohio, here we are entering the carousel at turn 12 at the apex of 11. The carousel at turn 12 is a decreasing radius corner, and if you take this like a standard carousel, you're going to run out of track. The outside half of this carousel is off-camber, which you can use to your advantage on brakes to help the car to rotate. So letting this play forward, driver comes past the apex, rides the rumble strips on the right, shoots the car straight in, begins to apply brakes here and turn in, the outside half using that camber. The driver then trail brakes through the corner, and then is staring right at the apex of 12. Done correctly, you're looking at the apex of 12 and looking at the entry of 13. It can be hard on throttle way before the apex. If you watch this video all the way to here, I sincerely appreciate you. Be sure to subscribe and click the bell to get alerted when we upload new content, here to help you get more from the chassis and the nut behind the wheel, you. As always, be safe, go fast, and have fun. Peace.